Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside Tacoma. Happy New Year. Our guest is our new mayor, Victoria Woodards. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Randy. Wow, you called me mayor.
Sure, I'm not the first.
Not at all, absolutely.
When we said goodbye to you a little over a year ago as you were leaving the city council to go run for mayor.
Yes.
Were you confident when you did that you'd be here today, or was it really kind of an unknown?
It was not. It was absolutely an unknown, but what I knew is that I had to try. That so many people had talked to me about me being their next leader, being their next mayor. And I knew, well, you know what, if that many people believe in me, then I've got to try. So I left knowing I was going to work really hard and spend the next year of my life really committed to talking to citizens and really, continuing to understand what the issues are in Tacoma, and hoping that in November that the citizens would make the decision that would choose me as their next mayor, and they did. So thank you, Tacoma.
And let's talk about the campaign a little bit, because it was a little different for a Tacoma mayor's race. It started out with 3 candidates.
Yeah.
2 women and a man, and that in itself was a little different for Tacoma to have potentially the general could have been 2 women running against each other, which would have been interesting. But in the end, even though it was close to primary between you and your primary opponent, in the end it wasn't really that close. When all the votes were counted, not just on election night, but the days after, it was like about a 9 point margin. And there was a lot of analysis done, amazing what we could do on Twitter and things like that these days.
Yeah, absolutely. People can analyze numbers to death.
You kind of went from losing large swaths of the north end and the center of the city to winning them in the general.
Yes.
How did you do that?
Well, first of all, I did what I was told. So let's be. It takes a team. It takes a team to win a race, and I will be really honest and open about that. It didn't happen because I did all of the work. It happened because we had tons of volunteers, and I had an incredible field team and consultants who really helped us focus, who really crunched the numbers. I know when I was in high school, I wanted to be an accountant, right? Because I love numbers, but these numbers are just. They're pretty intense, and I trusted people to really look at the numbers here in Tacoma and to really give direction. And we were really thoughtful, and we made sure that we were talking to the voters who we thought would vote for me. And we talked to a lot of voters. We talked to voters who didn't vote for me, but we spent a lot of time really talking to voters that we thought we could turn to our campaign.
Now, I've heard stories, and I want to confirm this, that you had, on weekends, you had hundreds, literally hundreds of people out doorbelling for you around the city, which is pretty unusual for a mayor's race.
I will tell you, every time we did something, someone said, that never happened before. And that's why this race never was about me being Tacoma's next mayor. It was never about Victoria. It really was about the people who live here. It really was about making Tacoma a greater place. And everyone who believed that jumped in the campaign, and they felt that. And that's why we turned out those numbers of hundreds of volunteers that would come out on a weekend. And in the pouring, I remember the most rainy Saturday in October, we were doorbelling, and we had close to 100 people out doorbelling that day. Because they believed in the message, and they believe in this city, and they want the city to continue to be a great place to live.
All right, so it was ground game.
Absolutely.
Which I know nothing about campaigns, but I've heard that term.
It was
ground game.
It's talking to people. It's knocking on the doors, and it's being intentional about it.
And then the message, which I want to get to in a minute, about what you were talking and what people were telling you.
Yeah.
But I also have to ask you this question, because there was kind of a movement in the campaign to portray you, a black woman, as the establishment candidate in Tacoma, which to me seemed very odd. Now, that may be just my own background and that I don't understand things. I freely admit that I don't understand lots of stuff, but that seemed odd to me. Did it seem odd to you?
It seemed extremely odd to me. Obviously, having been a black woman all of my life, that I've never been considered part of the establishment. As a matter of fact, people of color are continuously left out of the establishment as it is defined. But I think at some point, instead of fighting what that meant, I started to say, you know, and believe that if being the establishment means I have the experience, that I've built the relationships, that I can do the job. If that makes me the establishment, well, then I guess I'm the establishment. But I think it begs the question in our community to have a conversation around what does that really mean? Have we as people of color really gotten to a point where we can now be the establishment? And I think if we asked a lot of people that question, the answer would be absolutely not. As great as we are and as far as we've come, we still have a lot of work to do. But it was odd to be the establishment, and I thought, you know, even as mayor, there are still, I mean, as a city council member, as president of an organization, there are still rooms that I get left out of because I'm not the establishment. Or rooms I walk into when I'm the only person who looks like me in the room. And so we still got work to do, but if it means I had the experience and the relationships, well, then I guess.
Okay. Well, it strikes me that anytime when if we're still pointing out things like we had a black city manager when you were on the city council and a black mayor and a black school superintendent, if we're pointing those things out, then that means that they're not common enough that we just don't pay attention to them anymore.
Absolutely.
We don't point out when we have a white superintendent or a white city manager.
Nope.
It's only when they're not that we point them out. So that means that that's an exception, not a rule.
Absolutely. And you know, if you think about it, we don't even when we're talking about race, when we're talking about positions, unless you are a person of color, we don't even refer to race. You never, as you said, right? You don't say a white city manager, you just say a city manager. But when you have a person of color, you say a black city manager, or so we call it out when it's not, when you, as you say, it's not common. It still seems like it's not the norm.
Right. Okay. So now, those people who you had doorbelling for you, plus yourself out there doorbelling on all of those houses before the election, what were people telling you? What was really on their minds? We know what we kept reading about, but what were people really telling you was important?
You know what? I always tell people when they ask me, you know, so what do you want to do as mayor? And the things that I talked about wanting to do as mayor were not things I sat at home and said, you know what, I think this is really important. They're what we heard at the door. People really talked about jobs. People talked about the fact that, you know, I met a lot of people who commute from Tacoma to Seattle, who want to be able to work in Tacoma. I met a lot of people who are in Tacoma who work every day and can't afford still struggle to afford to live in Tacoma. So there really were a lot of people talking about, not only can I have do I want a good job? Do I want a job, but I want a good paying job. I want a family wage job so I can support myself and my family. So jobs was one thing we heard a lot about. Continued to hear a lot about reinvesting in police. Not that people think that violent crime has gone up very high in our community, but this property crimes thing is really an issue in Tacoma. And people want to be able, when they dial 911, they want to be able to get a response and not have to just go online and fill out a report. And I know that we've just had a presentation at the City Council about, you know, a 5-year plan to make sure that we get our police force back up to their pre-recession numbers. And I'm going to be really anxious to get in and get to work and see how we might be able to make that happen sooner. But I really want to figure out how we address that sooner rather than later. And then, you know, our safety net, homelessness, mental health, and affordability. I heard those all the time. I talked to not only seniors who were afraid of losing their homes or not being able to afford their homes, but I talked to parents of college graduates who their college graduate who was working in a job in Tacoma couldn't afford, that they were supplementing their housing allowance. So, I mean, affordability is a real issue in Tacoma, and it's great because we've just had a presentation on affordability. So it's great to know that what I heard at the doors are the focus of the city, and sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes they can be a little bit different. So it's good to know that we're headed in the direction of focusing on the things that citizens want us to focus on that are important to them.
It is interesting because the regional discussion that we hear about affordability and of housing and housing shortages and things like that is all about, you know, the comparison with the Seattle area and the price increases that they've seen up there in terms of housing prices and rents and all that sort of thing. And a lot of folks from Seattle whose incomes necessarily aren't that high find Tacoma affordable.
Absolutely.
So we're hearing about affordability from two directions in Tacoma. We are affordable if you're coming out of places like Seattle or Bellevue because you can't afford those, but we aren't necessarily affordable for the people who are already here.
Absolutely, and we've got to strike that balance. We've got to make sure that people who live here can afford to live here, and I think that we have an opportunity to address that before we become Seattle, before we price everybody out of Tacoma. I know one of the things that makes Tacoma so great is the fact that we have this diverse community, and we've got to make sure that we can continue to support that diverse community and that they can continue to live here.
Okay. Now, one of the things I've heard you say in one of the speeches I heard you give during the campaign, and then I've seen some comments from you in the press since the election, that you wanted to create a business advisory council. I may not be using the right name.
Nope, that's exactly the right name. Absolutely.
Now, that struck me as odd for two reasons. One is that nobody done it before. I mean, that's. I mean, because that isn't uncommon for a mayor to have some business advisors who talk to them about things from a business perspective. But apparently, that is new to Tacoma.
It absolutely is new. And you have this idea, and you think, oh, I'm just doing something. Somebody else said, when I was on the Park District has a business advisory council that does stuff for the parks. But I want a mayor's business advisory council. So often you hear the words Tacoma's not business friendly, but it depends on who you talk to, because I hear Tacoma's not business friendly, and then I walk into some businesses and they talk about how Tacoma is the best place to do business. And so, but I think if we're really gonna grow jobs, and that's what it takes, if we're really going to grow jobs, we really need to understand our business community. We need to be in relationship with them all the time. And I think the mayor has a responsibility to do that. And so I am putting together a business advisory council that won't be a formal committee. It's not going to be staffed by a whole bunch of people. It's just going to be a group that I informally meet with once a month, just to talk about issues, to ask them to grapple with some of the things that I will grapple with as mayor. When you talk about business, and I hate the words we use, but business versus, whatever this word is over here, because I think whether it's business versus environment or business versus labor, I think we need to remove that versus out of the way, because it really takes all of that in our community in order to make Tacoma successful. And so, but I think having those continued conversations with the business community is going to be important. But I've also thought about, that was great for business, but where else might you be able to get some insight? And I think what we have to understand is that if people are looking to the council to have all of the answers, or looking for me as mayor to be able to answer every question, that's not, I don't think that's, I'm smart, but I think the smartest thing we can do is tap the resources in our communities to talk to the people who live here, because I think they have some of the best ideas about how to solve some of our problems, or new innovative ideas about how to address things. So I've thought about some other business or some other advisory councils that I might put together to address other issues. And just, again, the informal conversation, I think, is where you can get some of the best ideas. And I want to be able to tap all the resources that we have in our community, which are the people who live here.
Okay. And yeah, they certainly have lots of opinions and lots of
ideas.
True. I mean, me included. I mean, it's a natural human thing. I have lots of opinions about things. Some people, like my poor wife, has to listen to them most of the time. Most everybody else doesn't. But yeah, so I think there is a tremendous talent pool sitting out there amongst those 210,000 people who live in Tacoma.
And we're fortunate that we have a great, I mean, this is a great union city, right? I mean, this is a great environmental city. I mean, there are all of these things all of these assets in our community that we have, that too often we pit them against one another. And I want to stop that. I want to be the mayor that brings us all to the table together, to recognize that we all make contributions to Tacoma, and working together, we can make Tacoma even greater than it is now.
Right, and I think the city's got a tremendous legacy in terms of its environmental work that it's done over the past several city councils and mayors.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean we rest on our laurels and just keep pointing back to the past.
No.
But we certainly, deserve some credit for. We do know that it's an important thing to protect the environment and be stewards of the water and the air and around here. So
absolutely, we protect the environment, we protect our workers and our people. I mean, Tacoma's got a rich history, and I think I call that kind of the foundation of what I'm going to have an opportunity to build on. But we've got a good foundation laid, and we're just going to add a little bit more to it.
Now, your predecessor is Mayor Marilyn Strickland, served 2 years on the city council before she ran for mayor. You served a little longer than that.
Yeah, so just a few years.
So it's a little different, I think, than her transition. So you think it's going to be difficult at all to remember, oh, that's right, I'm not a council member now. I have to actually go into City Hall every day now.
Yes.
And oh my God, they're calling me on everything now.
Right, exactly. I didn't get all those phone calls. No. I have. It's really funny. I've already begun to think about that. I was saying, this will be the first time in 13 years I'll have one job, and I get to go to one place every day. I don't have to have these split personalities. I'm going to be the mayor all day, every day, and not wear several different hats. And so, but I have accepted that the jobs are extremely different. I think going into this, I thought, well, no, I'm just going to be the mayor. I'm going to be the person who, convenes all the meetings and holds us all together. And so that being a little bit different, but it's a lot bigger than that. And having run for city council twice and then run for mayor, our citizens and people in our community and people who do business in our community absolutely see it differently. Because I know that this, you would think having run 3 citywide campaigns, having been on the park board and ran for city council twice, you would think that, oh, you know what this looks like, you know how to do this. But running for mayor, people have a completely different expectation. And they require, or they believe there's a completely different skill set to be mayor. And so, but I think it will be challenging, but I don't want to say challenging. I think there will be great opportunities.
I think it's a position that just in American psyche we hold in a different place. There are certain titles that once you've gotten them, because you've been elected to them, they stay with you the rest of your life. You'll be referred to as mayor years after you're not mayor anymore. Just like senators are referred to as senator or ambassador or governor. Yeah. Those are certain titles. Now, not to disparage our members of the House of Representatives, but usually people don't get called representative.
That is true.
Later.
That is so true. I see Senator Franklin. Yeah, nobody continued to call me council member when I got done, but I see both Senator Franklin and Senator Regala. And when I see them, I both say senator, and they're like, no, it's Rosa and Debbie. I mean, it is. I have said now I've lost my first name. Even as mayor, I've lost my first name. I don't. When I hear Victoria, I'm like, who are they talking to? But there is an expectation that comes when you're called mayor. And I am rising to that occasion.
All right. Now, one of the many roles of mayor is to represent the city in places other than City Hall.
Absolutely.
And especially, actually, outside of City Hall.
Yeah.
Are there some regional responsibilities that you're already aware of, that things that you really have an interest in that you want to take part of?
I'm really interested in this transportation conversation. So with Sound Transit and Pierce Transit are 2 boards that I didn't sit on while I was a city council member, but I have a spot as mayor. I really, I want to make sure that we get light rail to Tacoma as quickly as we can, but I also want to make sure that we improve transportation around our city. When we talk about being an affordable city, there are a lot of things. Sometimes we only talk about affordability from the sense of where you live and what you pay for where you live, but affordability is a lot of things. I mean, affordability is transportation. It's, do I have to get in my car and drive everywhere? Can I walk to a grocery store? Can I walk to other amenities? Can I take the bus when I want to? And so, I know we've been restoring some of our service, but I want to make sure, I want to continue to fight for and make sure that we're getting our fair share in Tacoma, and that we're providing the kind of transportation system that is important to the people who live here, so that we can, and we talk about environment, right? That's another way to do it, is to get people out of their cars. So, so certainly I am really interested in learning more and being a part of those regional conversations. And I think not even necessarily in regional committees, but I think there are some regional issues that we can really begin to work on together to solve, like homelessness. Because what happens is if we don't look at it regionally, we just move it from one place to another. Another thing that happened election night is that we have several new women mayors on the I-5 corridor. And I am anxious to get us all together and think about how we can work together to solve some of these regional issues like homelessness and even affordability to a degree. There are some conversations that we can have regionally about how we address these issues. So I think in addition to some of the regional committees, like the Puget Sound Regional Council, and where people come together. But I think there are some things that we're going to be able to do outside of those formal committees.
All right. Now, you mentioned earlier in the program the getting our police force back up to its pre-recession levels. Part of the problem has been we've had as many retirements as we've had hires, and
absolutely,
and it is a process to find a police officer and do the background checks and all that kind of thing. But I wanted to focus on something else regarding police, because when you were on the city council, you were kind of the instrumental person behind what we called Project Peace.
Absolutely.
Which was to, even though Tacoma's police had a fairly good relationship with the community and not like what we've seen in other parts of the country, not taking that for granted, but kind of building on that, and how to maybe prevent something like we saw in other communities across the country. Now, you had to kind of give that up while you were off the council.
I'm coming back, though.
I'm
here.
So
I'm here.
I assume we're going to hear more about Project Peace and taking it to the next level?
Absolutely. Tacoma is incredibly fortunate that we haven't had the national narrative here in Tacoma. But in the midst of crisis is the wrong time to build relationships. And I think that we did some good work with Project Peace. I'm really anxious, getting updates and being able to continue to move that forward. And then figuring out if there are other dialogues we need to have in the conversation. There were several recommendations that came out of Project Peace. And having been gone and getting it back, I want to see where we are in addressing some of those recommendations, but making sure that that's continuing to move forward, so that we're continuing to build those relationships and community.
Another issue that I know you were very active when you were on the council was gang prevention kinds of efforts, and we went to D.C. a couple times for some grant money to help fund some programs here in the community. Have you kept track of what's happened with that since you've been off the council?
I have to be really honest. For the past year, I've been running for mayor. So that's really been my focus. But I know that Councilmember Lonigan and Councilmember Blocker have been leading that effort. And they're making some movement. We are not having the kind of gang violence that we had when I first got on the council. But the moment that you take your eyes off the prize, that can slip. And so, again, as I talk about that safety net in our community, and it's so very, very, very important to continue to focus on that. And so we'll want to make sure that that's continuing to move forward as well.
All right. And then another issue that I know you've mentioned that is important to you, that dealing with homelessness as a regional issue. But I have to say that in my long time with the city of Tacoma, one of the things I'm just amazingly proud of that the city did, and I had absolutely nothing to do with input on, just watched it as an observer, as an employee, was the city's approach to the homelessness emergency declaration the council passed last May, and the creation of both the initial site where we went in with some hygiene programs, and then the creation of the stability site, and moving along hopefully to being able to go to the phase 3 in sometime in 2018. What were your thoughts? I know you were busy running for mayor, but you must have paid attention to that.
You couldn't help it. Plus, it was something I heard at the doors all the time, and that you heard from businesses. I mean, that was something that rang out across, because across our city, it affected our entire city. Either homeless people were walking through neighborhoods. I mean, so I did, and I actually visited the stability site during the campaign. And had heard a whole lot about what it was and what it wasn't, and I went there, and I was so my heart was warmed, because people were in a place where they could wash their clothes, they could come and go, they weren't forced to be there, they weren't locked in a fence, but they were safe, and they seemed happy to be there, because it's their choice to be in, and they were dry, and they were warm, and they were building bikes. They had something to do, and so. But I think what that says to us, though, and that was only a small number of people, and we have a huge homeless issue, is that we really have got to look into investing in some permanent supportive housing. That there are people in our community that, despite being able to give them wraparound services and send them on their way, that there are going to be people who always need some assistance. That's when we talk about mental health. But these people are at a site where people could come in and they would get all of these services that would surround them. They didn't have to go. I mean, when you're homeless, having to go from one side of town to the other side of town for the next services is difficult. And so being able to wrap them with all of the services that they need, I think, is really important. But I really believe that kind of at the crux of this homelessness issue, and I said it on the campaign trail, is that it's not just about providing a roof over someone's head. That's the start, but we've got to deal with issues of mental health and job training. If we, I mean, you know, all of the issues that come with being homeless, we've got to be able to partner in our community and find ways to address all of those. And one of the things I heard was that, you know, our faith community does an amazing job supporting the homeless. We've got community organizations and just individuals. I know people who will just put together some packets and on a Friday night go out and hand out bags that have toothpaste and toothbrush and, you know, and food in them. But I think that we might want to look at how we can have a more coordinated effort in Tacoma in addressing homelessness, so that we, all the people who want to volunteer, instead of, you know, feeding, we've got, you know, 3 organizations bringing food on Sunday, no one bringing food on Monday. So how do we better coordinate kind of all these organizations and services and people who want to help the homeless in our community? But to get at the crux of it, we've got to address all of the issues that surround homelessness.
We just got a minute left, but I also, the thing that struck me about it is the data we collected. Not that these people are human beings, but we learned something about who these folks are that are homeless in community. And most of them are from here. They're not like they're coming like we were. People were afraid people were flocking here, but no, they're from here. And there is more. The other comment you hear all the time is if they would just get a job, they wouldn't be homeless. But a lot of them have significant barriers between where they are now and getting a job. Absolutely.
Well, Randy, I'll say this. We just have a minute left. I want to take just a quick second to say thank you. I want to say thank you to my volunteers. I want to say thank you to the citizens of Tacoma, but I also want to take a moment and say thank you to our outgoing Mayor Marilyn Strickland, and our outgoing council members for the work that they've done for the last 8 years, and for the foundation that they've built and the contributions that they've made to make Tacoma the place it is today.
And that's a perfect place to end. So thank you for being our guest here today. We will have you back many times to come.
I can't wait.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Randy.
Our guest has been Mayor Victoria Woodards. We look forward to seeing you next time here on Inside Tacoma.